pase, pierna derecha, directo al arco, ¡golazo! ¡Golazo!
The world of football with a soccer perspective. This is Soccer Today with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee, live on the Sports Podcasting Network.
Fair enough, Beau. I'm going to ask you to start this interview a very deep philosophical question about this presidential election that Kevin and I watch with great interest, but ultimately dispassionately from up here in the north. And that is this. There's a lot of hand-wringing around what's happening in U.S. soccer right now. A lot of ideas flying around, a lot of hope, I think, that a leadership change will make things better. But my question is just simply this. How much will this matter? How much will the leadership change ultimately make a difference in what people see on a day-to-day basis in American soccer?
It'll matter more than people think and less than people think. And what I mean by that is there are scripts and minutes like I have because I have no life. Then you will see that there are times when Sunil Gulati, who has had decades to build his coalition, there are times he does not get his way. And that's the way it goes. And that's the way to work for a new president, because a new president, I think, is going to have to do some bridge building in a big way. We're looking at such a contested election, 8 candidates in this field. It is highly unlikely that anyone is going to come in and get a majority on the first ballot. So you're already going to have to start making some deals before you even get elected. And once you get elected, you're going to have to make even more deals. So in that sense, the president doesn't have such sweeping power. So the people who seem to think that everything rides on this election are wrong. Now, that said, it's certainly a change in tone, whatever happens here. If it's Kathy Carter, then it's not the death of the reform movement by any stretch of the imagination. The next president is going to have to pay attention to it, but it is a setback. And certainly it sends a message one way or another. If Eric Winalda wins, does that mean that there's promotion and relegation within 3 years in the U.S.? No, probably not. But then, I'm sorry, I just realized I'm having some technical issues, but I'm hopefully solving them now. If there's, it does matter. It will send a message, and so, it may make change go a little bit faster. It's just a matter of degree, really.
There was an interview that Gulati did with ESPN a week or so ago where he sort of was very critical of some of the ideas that are out there, so calling them irresponsible, to paraphrase a little bit. Was he off base in doing that interview? Was that sort of a backhanded way to support Carter and to support the status quo?
No, I don't think so. I think it was I think it was simply that some of what Sunil has been saying has been going a little bit out of context. I saw he did a session at Philadelphia as well. And what he's really saying is that he's just offering a reality check, and he's going to do that. He will still be on the board after this election as a non-voting member. The immediate past president remains on the board in that capacity. And so he's going to give a reality check on things. And so I think for me, when he says something's irresponsible and so forth, it's in the sense of these sorts of promises. Now, in defense of the other candidates all realize this. And Winalda understands that he's not going to come in and immediately make all these sweeping changes. I don't think his followers understand that. And I think that might be a little bit of the pushback that Gulati is getting. And bear in mind, if you look at social media, the stuff that is sent toward Gulati, frankly, is unconscionable. And frankly, some of the things that have been, some of the criticisms that have been lobbed at Gulati are, for lack of a better word, racist. I mean, there are people who say, well, take your cricket playing, blah, 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 blah. It's ridiculous. Now, that's not the candidate speaking. You would never, ever hear that from Eric Winalda. In fact, Eric Winalda demanded and got a round of applause for Sunil Gulati at his session in Philadelphia. But I think Galati is sort of having the freedom to lash out now a bit as a lame duck is doing so, and we should not ignore him because this is a man who has a lot to say, a man who grasps the reality of things better than anyone. Now, we may still disagree with his reaction to it. We may still say that he's too cautious about where pro soccer can go or what the president can do to push things. Or we can say that he mishandled youth soccer and was too laissez-faire in that respect. Perhaps it would be better for a president coming in to focus more on the youth aspect than the pro aspect. And there are some candidates out there who may do that. But still, given all this, Sunil is someone that we're going to need to keep listening to, even when he's no longer president.
There's 8 candidates for this election, Beau, and one of the things that I'm actually wondering, and it really gets my attention, is we all hear of what Winalda is saying, of what Kathy Carter is saying, and Cal Martino, the big 3 profile. But what I'm actually wondering is the other less talked about names that are not as flashy in the presentation aspect, but if you look at the content and how the container, there's a bit of experience there. I'm talking about the Caligari, the Winograd, the other obscure dark horses of this election. What can you tell me about their content of their program?
Well, I've maintained for a while that I think there are 2 general reactions to Mike Winograd. There are the people who have not heard him and say, who? And there are the people who have heard him and go, wow, this guy has a lot of good ideas and also a very good background in the game. I think Steve Gans is kind of the same way. Gans had the advantage of a head start. He was the first candidate to declare. There have been claims that he, as of now, would certainly be in the top 3 of the election. I don't know that we can say that. Every state representative I talked with in Philadelphia said, oh yeah, we're going back to our board or having the annual general meeting coming up, and then we're going to figure out who we're supporting. And so I think most people have really not declared at this point. But Gans certainly does have some support. Winograd is having a tougher time getting some support, I think, just because he came in after Gans, and fairly or unfairly, I think some people lump them together a little bit. They do have different ideas. I do think people are receptive to what they're talking about, and granted, to some extent, all the candidates are talking about the same things. They want more transparency. They want more accountability. They would prefer not to miss any more World Cups. That's all fairly obvious. They all want to cut costs for youth players. Some of them have more specific ideas than others. I think Gans and Winograd probably have some of the best. But there's a difference between being receptive to those ideas and deciding, well, that person's going to win and I'm going to vote for it. And look, I think to some extent there are some sheep involved in this who want to be behind the right person. And so this might be a sort of thing.
And we just lost Beau. Duane, you still there? Oh, we just lost both Duane and Beau. And we got him back. Here we go. Sorry about that. We lost you for a second.
Okay.
And we're back. So, Beau, the other aspect of this that I'm wondering is we have, like you mentioned, the program of the Winograd and Gans that are well thought of and with experience and seeing how it's run behind the scenes and came up with those programs. Then we have the outsiders, the Winaldas, the Martinos, and even Kathy Carter to some aspect. And they have the flashiness of it. So how long until one of those 3 takes the program of one of the other 3?
Oh, until they sort of borrow the ideas of someone else?
Exactly, because we've seen this in election in other part of this world and other part of society, some of them in sports as well, when you see a popular candidate, but with the beginning of the program not necessarily having the deepest program itself, the deepest election platform, and now the more the campaign is going, the more they can borrow ideas that you see become popular, and you bolster up your content with it.
Well, the funny thing is, the only example of that I can see so far is that I think a lot of other candidates have pounced on what was first raised by, of all people, Paul Caligiuri, who talked about the ODP program, which is a longstanding program. In fact, it's been 40 years or so, in which it's supposed to be talent identification development done within each state. You try out to become a member of a small pool, and then a state pool, and a regional pool, and so forth. And that was the traditional route into the national team. That has been usurped by the Development Academy, where 100 or so plus clubs, including all the MLS clubs, have these academy programs, and the ODP program has been sort of shunted aside. Caligiuri wants to bring it back, and then now so does everybody else. And now some people have different takes on it. I mean, Hope Solo insists that in today's climate of the Development Academy,
your presentation of the program, it was very focused on NWSL and very focused on the women's side, equality and transparency as well. And then you have a other aspect of it, of the Winograd example program, where he explains a bit more how pay to play maybe is not the way to go, how the structures of pyramids of academies should be playing. And I'm just saying, we're going to see alliances. We're going to see in the future maybe a lower profile candidate make an allegiance and an alliance with a highly profile candidate to at least maybe push an agenda through and have an agreement that, look, build those type of pyramids for the players, and I'll support you, and I'll draw from the election.
We will certainly see alliances form, because again, I seriously doubt that a candidate is going to get a majority on the first ballot, and there's no formal bylaw that says, well, if you got the least number of votes, you have to drop out. But you will see some alliances forming at that point, and I do think candidates are actually talking about that now, saying, hey, if I get 15% and you get 5%, will you speak up on behalf of me? In fact, this is why I think it's going to be very difficult for Kathy Carter to win, even if she has the highest number of votes on the first ballot, which is entirely possible, because she has a distinct block. She has Major League Soccer is going to vote for Kathy Carter. There's no doubt about that. USL will probably vote for Kathy Carter. She'll probably get a few athletes, and then she'll get some state associations, the ones that I think are most resistant to change or think everything was absolutely perfect under Sunil Gulati, and here's the person who is most like Sunil. We're going to vote for her. And so she may get 30 to 40% on the first ballot. I don't see how she adds to that. I don't see any other candidate stepping up at the AGM and saying, okay, I only got 5%, I'm dropping out. I would urge my supporters to vote for Kathy Carter. I don't see that happening. I don't see someone who votes for one of the other Southern candidates then turning around and going for Carter. I think they would go to any other front runner or anyone else who got a significant number of votes. Could be Winalda, could be Gans, could be Martino, could be Carlos Cordero, who has a very low profile, but we can't rule him out because he won. He's the only person in this field who's won an election before. 2 years ago, he won the vice presidency, defeating an incumbent and defeating Kevin Payne, who you know from Toronto, someone with a long track record in U.S. soccer. So that's something that we can't really dismiss.
Fair enough. That sort of was my question about Carter. And, she is the status quo in many ways. I don't know if that's completely fair, but certainly that's the perception out there. So I'm going to go the opposite side of that, and that's the Winaldo, which I think most people view as the flag bearer for the ultimate other side of that, the reform side of that. Is he too extreme, too rough to win this, or could he in fact get a coalition together that sees him and that sort of hyper reform agenda win the day?
He has a very delicate line to walk at this point, because he certainly has a base of support, a lot of whom are people who don't have votes. They're the average person on Twitter shouting out insults about Kathy Carter and so forth. These are people who did not have votes. Now, he does have a fair number of voters on his side. A couple of state associations have declared. He's fairly popular in the adult soccer wing of things, which has a little more than 25% of the vote, and those are